Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being truly well-informed. We break down complex topics into clear, sometimes surprising insights.
Glad to be diving in.
Today, we're plunging into a really rich, but maybe often overlooked section of Scripture, Mark chapter 8.
It's definitely dense with meaning.
Yeah, our source material for this is detailed excerpts from MCS Mark chapter 8, which is this incredibly in-depth study of the chapter.
Yeah.
It's just packed with layers, and we're here to, peel some of those back for you.
And our mission, really, for this deep dive is to unpack the profound themes Jesus is communicating here, things like sustenance, spiritual understanding, and what it truly means, what it actually costs to follow him. We want to explore how these ancient stories, these narratives, still resonate, how they connect with our own experiences today, trying to find truth and clarity.
Definitely. It can feel like a confusing world sometimes.
It can.
So let's jump right in. Mark chapter 8, it kicks off with that second major feeding miracle, the feeding of the 4,000.
Right, the second one.
Jesus is facing this huge crowd again. They've been with him for 3 days this time, out in a remote spot.
3 days is a long time without supplies.
Exactly. They're hungry, and Jesus feels this deep compassion. He actually says he's worried they'll collapse on the way home if he sends them off empty.
Understandable concerns.
But then we get this really puzzling reaction from the disciples. They ask him, basically, where can anyone get enough bread out here to feed all these people?
It's almost unbelievable, isn't it?
It really makes you pause. I mean, they just saw him feed 5,000. What do you think is going on there? Is it just bad memory, or is it something deeper? Like, they fundamentally didn't grasp who he was yet.
Yeah, that's what's so striking. It's why people sometimes call this the neglected miracle. It feels like more than just forgetting. It's almost like a selective spiritual amnesia, you know? They saw him feed 5,000 with just 5 loaves and a couple of fish, and yet here they are, slightly different situation, and boom, right back to human limitations.
Right back to how can we do this?
Exactly. And it forces us, I think, to look at ourselves. How often do we forget God's past provisions in our own lives? If we don't actively remember, really internalize those moments of grace, those times he came through, we can find ourselves totally unprepared for the next challenge, the next need. It's more than remembering history. It's about grabbing hold of a divine principle.
That point about our own forgetfulness,
Yeah.
that it hits home. So, okay, despite their doubt, the miracle happens. Jesus asks, how many loaves? They say 7.
7 this time.
He tells the crowd to sit down, takes the loaves, gives thanks, breaks them, and hands them to his disciples, his talmidim, to distribute.
Yeah.
And there were a few fish, too, which he blessed and served.
And the details are interesting. The source material points out the grass wasn't green this time,
Oh, okay.
suggesting it's a different time of year than the feeding of the 5,000. So it's not just a repeat performance, it's a fresh display of his power.
In a distinct setting.
Exactly. And again, everyone ate until they were full, and they collected 7 large baskets of leftovers. About 4,000 people fed.
7 large baskets. Wow.
And the significance of having 2 huge feeding miracles like this, it's not just Jesus showing off. It's like he's double testifying about who he is. In Jewish law, you needed 2 witnesses. So here, Jesus is providing this undeniable, acted-out evidence twice over that he is the bread of life. He wasn't just saying it, he was proving it.
That's powerful evidence indeed. Yet, like right after this undeniable proof of provision, Jesus runs into a totally different kind of hunger. The Prushim, the Pharisees, show up demanding a sign from heaven, not because they want to understand, but seemingly to trap him.
Yeah, and you can almost feel Jesus' reaction. The text says he responded with a sigh that came straight from his heart.
A deep sigh.
Yeah, like deep sorrow or pity. Because they were just blind to the signs already happening right in front of them. People being healed, thousands being fed.
The very things he was doing.
Exactly. But they wanted something spectacular, something more grandiose from the sky. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much are we sometimes like that? Looking for the big dramatic signs, maybe fixated on, end time stuff. Instead of just acknowledging the small daily works of God all around us, the everyday whispers of his truth.
He sighs because they're missing the whole point, chasing the spectacular, ignoring the miracle under their noses. And right after that, he gives this crucial warning to his own disciples about the hametz.
The yeast or leaven.
Yeah, the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod.
And predictably, perhaps, the disciples are completely confused. They start whispering among themselves, thinking he's literally talking about them forgetting to give him bread for the boat trip.
Oh, bless their hearts, sir.
Right. It just highlights this ongoing struggle they had. Why were they still so stuck on the physical, the literal bread, even after seeing miracle after miracle? It shows how deeply rooted that earthly viewpoint was.
Still thinking about lunch.
Pretty much. And that analogy of yeast, the hametz, is so potent. They would have known yeast, of course, this tiny organism that ferments, makes bread rise.
And they knew about cleaning it out for Passover.
Exactly. Removing all the leaven from their houses for Passover was a huge deal, symbolizing purging sin and corruption. So it was a really vivid picture for them of something subtle, pervasive, that spreads and corrupts.
Like the Pharisees' teachings.
Precisely. Their legalistic teachings, their focus on rules over relationship, and Herod's influence, too, that worldly, political, power-hungry mindset. These things could just quietly spread through your thinking and contaminate your spiritual understanding, just like yeast works its way through dough.
And since they were still focused on the physical, Jesus just cuts right through it. He hits them with these 5 really profound questions. He basically says, don't you see or understand yet? Are your hearts hardened like stone? You have eyes, don't you see? You have ears, don't you hear? And don't you remember?
5 questions, and that number, 5, is often linked in the Bible with grace, with a gift.
Okay, interesting.
It's like Jesus, through these intense, almost pleading questions, is trying desperately to get them to grasp something beyond human effort, beyond works. The yeast he warned them about was that Pharisaic teaching the system that kept trying to add the law, human effort, back onto grace.
Trying to earn God's favor.
Exactly, making people feel they had to work for it. Jesus was pushing them, gently but firmly, to shift from an earning mindset to a receiving mindset, to just accept the gift.
And he really hammers it home, doesn't he? He reminds them, remember the 5,000, how many baskets of leftovers? 12. And the 4,000, 7. Then he asks almost exasperatedly, and you still don't understand.
It's definitely a moment of loving frustration, I think, but the core lesson couldn't be clear. What was the disciples' part in those feeding miracles?
Just handing out the bread Jesus provided.
Exactly. Simple delivery, facilitation. And what do the crowds have to do?
Take it. Accept the food.
Just accept the gift. Jesus was enough for their physical hunger, and the implication is clear. He is just as sufficient, totally enough for our spiritual hunger, for salvation. It's a beautiful picture of sharing faith, isn't it?
Yeah.
Our job is simply to present the gift God has already provided. People can accept it or refuse it. We're not supposed to make them jump through hoops or earn it.
Presenting a gift, not demanding payment. I like that.
Mm.
Okay, that leads us to another really powerful healing moment, but it's also kind of a journey to sight, isn't it? They get to Bethsaida.
Right, Bethsaida.
And people bring a blind man to Jesus, begging him just to touch him.
And what's fascinating here, really illuminating, is that Jesus takes the man outside the town before he heals him.
Why outside?
Well, Bethsaida, like Nazareth, was a place that had seen plenty of Jesus's miracles.
But hadn't really accepted him.
Exactly. They'd largely rejected him.
Yeah.
So taking the man outside suggests moving away from that atmosphere of unbelief. Then Jesus spits in the man's eyes, which sounds strange to us, but likely symbolized the word of God being applied directly. He lays his hands on him and asks, "Do you see anything?"
And the man's first answer is so memorable. I see people, but they look like walking trees.
Partial sight, not quite there yet.
Right. So Jesus puts his hands on the man's eyes again, a second time. And only then is his sight fully restored. He sees everything clearly. Why the 2 stages? What's with the partial sight first?
That's a great question, and it seems very intentional. Why not instant, perfect clarity? This 2-step process, it's like a living illustration.
An illustration of what?
Perhaps that even people within religious settings, like Bethsaida, people who've had some exposure to God's truth but maybe haven't fully grasped it, maybe only see walking trees that can achieve full spiritual sight. But it requires yielding completely to Jesus's touch, maybe even a second touch, a deeper work, and telling him not to go back into the town afterward.
Yeah, what about that?
It seems to underscore that sometimes finding true clarity means leaving behind those old, maybe resistant ways of thinking, or even places where God's full work isn't welcome.
Stepping away from the walking trees view.
Maybe. You know, connecting it to today, you could say many religious traditions might hold a lot of knowledge about God, but maybe leave little room for his active, spirit-led work now.
Like a tree with no fruit.
Kind of, or a place where people only have partial sight. This story shows Jesus leading people out of mere formalism, perhaps, into a space where he can bring full, clear spiritual vision, moving from knowing about him to truly seeing.
That's a profound thought needing to step outside sometimes to truly see. And speaking of seeing clearly, we get to maybe the most pivotal moment in the chapter. They're near Caesarea Philippi.
A turning point.
And Jesus asks his disciples, first, who are people saying I am? And then he makes it personal, direct. But you, who do you say I am?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? The one that still divides the world. The disciples report the gossip, the popular opinions. John the Baptist, back from the dead. Elijah, maybe one of the prophets.
A great man, maybe inspired, but still human.
Right. Good guesses, but wrong. But then Peter, bold as ever, steps up and declares, "You are the Mashiach, the Christ, the Messiah."
The big confession.
It's the first time one of them publicly declares it, a huge moment.
And yet, right after Peter says this, Jesus tells them strictly not to tell anyone about him.
Yeah.
That feels backward. If he's the Messiah, shouldn't they shout it from the rooftops?
It does seem counterintuitive on the surface, yeah. But there's a critical reason. It wasn't the right time, or maybe the right way, for God's plan to unfold through just human talk.
Talk is cheap.
In a sense, yes. God was going to reveal Jesus as the Christ in a much more powerful, undeniable way. Through his suffering, his death on a cross, and crucially, his resurrection. That would be the ultimate proof, the divine declaration that couldn't be argued away.
Okay, so the timing and the method of revelation mattered.
Deeply. So once Peter makes the confession, Jesus immediately starts teaching them what that really means. About his coming suffering, rejection by the religious leaders, the elders, chief priests, Torah teachers, that he had to be killed, and after 3 days, he had to rise again. He laid it all out.
The whole shocking truth. No sugarcoating.
None at all. And sadly, that prediction of being rejected by the religious establishment, well, it kind of mirrors how the church throughout history has sometimes become just another religious system.
How so?
Well, sometimes in creating systems and structures, the core radical teachings of Jesus, especially about grace being a free gift, not something earned by rules, get pushed aside or diluted. Old laws creep back in, new rules get added, and it moves away from the simplicity of Christ.
Rejecting his core message, in a way.
It can happen subtly, and this leads right into Peter's reaction. He hears about suffering and death, and it just doesn't fit his picture of the conquering Messiah.
Right, he expected victory, not rejection.
Exactly. So Peter takes Jesus aside and starts to rebuke him. Can you imagine telling Jesus he's wrong?
That took some nerve. Or maybe just misunderstanding.
Probably both. But Jesus' response is stunning. He turns, looks pointedly at all his disciples, and rebukes Peter with maybe the harshest words possible. "Get behind me, Satan."
Whoa.
Ah,
From "you are the Christ" to "get behind me, Satan" in just a few verses. How is that possible? How could Peter be called Satan?
it's a jaw-dropping moment for sure. It forces us to see there are really only two fundamental mindsets, two sides in the spiritual reality we live in. You're either aligned with God's plan, his perspective, which often includes suffering on the path to glory, or you're operating from a purely human viewpoint, maybe unintentionally, that prioritizes comfort, power, avoiding pain, wanting instant gratification. Jesus is saying Peter's mindset at that moment, focused on avoiding the cross, was aligned with Satan's agenda, not God's. What you set your mind on determines which team you're effectively playing for.
That's sobering. Your mindset determines your alignment.
It's a stark warning. And then Jesus calls everyone over the crowd and his disciples and lays out the true cost, the radical demand of following him.
Right. He says, if anyone wants to come after me, let him say no to himself, take up his execution stake, and keep following me.
These might be the most challenging words in the whole chapter. Deny himself, that doesn't mean self-hatred. It means admitting we can't make ourselves right with God through our own efforts. It's letting go of self-sufficiency.
Giving up, trying to earn it.
Precisely. And take up his execution stake, the cross. It means willingly embracing God's will, even when it leads to suffering, shame, ridicule, being willing to die to our own agenda for his sake.
It's a total surrender.
Total. Jesus then explains the paradox. Try to save your life, cling to this world's values and comforts, and you'll lose it eternally. But if you lose your life, give it completely for his sake and the gospel's sake, you'll actually save it forever.
So after this whole journey through Mark 8, provision, blindness, confession, rebuke, the call to the cross, what's the bottom line for us today? It seems to come down to that ultimate choice, right? That question he poses.
Exactly, the ultimate trade-off.
What will it benefit a person if he gains the whole world but forfeits his life? It just cuts right to the core, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What are we truly living for?
It really does. Because what could you possibly trade for your eternal life, for your very soul? The warning is blunt. If we're ashamed of Jesus and his words now, in this generation that often rejects him, then the Son of Man will be ashamed of us when he returns in glory. Without Jesus, the true bread of life, the one who meets our deepest needs, we're spiritually dead, lost.
Wow, what an incredibly rich chapter. This deep dive really brought out so much. We went from physical bread to spiritual life, from blindness and misunderstanding to the cusp of true sight, and then straight into the heart of what faith costs, the radical call of discipleship.
It really hammers home that Jesus as the bread of life isn't just a nice metaphor. It's about him being the essential spiritual nourishment, the truth, the grace, the salvation he offers freely.
A gift to be received.
If we'll only accept it.
So, as we wrap up, maybe the lingering thought is tied back to Jesus asking his disciples again and again, do you not yet see or understand?
A challenging question to leave with.
Yeah. What hidden leaven, what subtle distortions or misunderstandings might be clouding our vision today? What might be keeping us from fully seeing and grasping the signs, the grace, the gifts that God has placed right in front of us, calling us deeper?